and as a result, warrants of arrest were issued. If there was no basis or misuse of the law, the courts would have dismissed the cases outright. During trial, the accused are represented by counsel and are afforded every opportunity to refute and present evidence to challenge the charges. At every step of the process, the respondents' rights are respected, including the opportunity to respond to the charges through a lawyer of their own choice in accordance with the rules issued by the Supreme Court. We wish to emphasize that the enforcement of the Anti-Terrorism Act is done in the Philippines with utmost responsibility. We understand the significance and potential implications for civil liberties or misuse of the law. We therefore enforce the law fairly and judiciously, ensuring that it is never used arbitrarily or whimsically, and that every action we take adheres to due process and the rule of law. Thank you.
Mr. Jonathan, just to address the issue on the measures on anti-corruption, first of all, let me just say that the Philippines is actually a state party to the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. And back in, there have been many efforts to address corruption in the Philippines. In 2014, there was this executive order institutionalizing the Integrity Management Program as the National Corruption Prevention Program. And a total of 19 agencies have so far implemented this INP. And the Philippines is also an early adopter of the Open Government Partnership. Just 2 weeks ago, we hosted the Asia Pacific Conference on the Open Government Partnership. And this is, I think, a very effective measure, because this one actually promotes citizens' audit, citizens' participation, even in the budget process. Now, very recently, we have also enacted the new Government Procurement Act of 2024, and this one addresses several loopholes in our previous Government Procurement Act. And related to that, we have already we have established this MPhilJEPS. This is the modernized Philippine Government Electronic Procurement Service. And so what this means is that it increases the transparency that actually allows for greater participation of the private sector in the bidding process. And even our Philippine Competition Commission actually uses a tool which is being used to determine if there has been bid rigging in any of this bids of government, and they are actually applying this. First, it has been piloted and seen to be useful, and this is now being done. And there's also this greater move for an expansive move for the digitalization of many of our government processes. And therefore, that means that a lot of transactions no longer require this face-to-face, and therefore that lessens the opportunities for corruption. And we're still proceeding with this digitalization. That's also part of our transformation agenda under this Philippine Development Plan. And then with respect to the IPs, yeah. Sorry. With the spirit and intent of the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act, particularly in relation to environmental protection and responsible mining in the utilization of mineral resources. So these guidelines emphasize the protection of designated sacred grounds, ancestral domains, and cultural heritage as no-go zones, and ensuring that no major agreements are approved without the undergoing the free, prior, informed consent process with indigenous peoples. just to say as well that the Philippines also has this again this campaign to encourage cultural mapping, and to encourage as well that we just had this Philippine Creative Industry Development Act, and one of the creative industry's assets there is actually to do with the cultural assets, and what we want to do is first of all that these are mapped, and then these are registered with IP, with intellectual property, so that the rights, and of course so that it can also be so that the indigenous peoples community will also benefit from it. So, with respect to the regressive taxes, you're quite right in saying that a big part of our taxation is really to do with indirect taxes, the value-added tax, for instance, and I guess it's really to do with the fact that we do not have a broad tax base. We still have a number of our families actually who rely on overseas remittances for their income and for their expenses, and these are actually not being taxed because, as you know, the income is earned outside of the country, and but we also know that these remittances are actually also not equally shared amongst the income deciles, and therefore the way to go is really to be able to to have this indirect taxation. Now, there's also a number of our tax laws that actually what we call the sin taxes that actually kind of punishes those undesirable behavior. For instance, the consumption of alcohol, the consumption of tobacco, the consumption of vape products, and these are being imposed a higher tax, and that's also a way that we are able to realize revenues, and part of the revenues collected there are actually being earmarked for our healthcare system, for instance the PhilHealth, and actually a part there is also being earmarked for the SDGs. So I think I'll stop there, Madam Chairperson, and move on to the next cluster.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we just continued because I think that there was an interest to receive also the answers to questions which were addressed before moving to the follow-up questions. So I open now the floor to follow-up questions on Cluster 1. And I see one request. Ms. Lee, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, distinguished members of the delegation, for the information. I would like to ask 3 questions on IDPs. There are a large number of internally displaced persons due to armed conflict and disasters in the state party. In this regard, what measures have you taken to ensure that IDPs have access to adequate food, decent housing, and basic services, including water and sanitation, electricity, healthcare, education, psychosocial support, and social protection services, taking into account their specific needs? And second, what measures have you taken to ensure that IDPs, in particular, victims of the Malawi siege in 2017, are able to return to their homes or regions safely and with dignity, or find durable solutions to their displacement? And lastly, we note that the enactment of rights of internally displaced persons at the regional level, the Bangsa-Moro Autonomous Region. So please tell us the status of bill protecting the human rights of IDPs at the national level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. I still have a request, 5 requests for the floor and 8 minutes, so it's a kind reminder that you keep within 1.5 minutes each. So Mr. Kunai, please, you have the floor.
Chair, yes, I first of all wish to express our appreciation and gratitude for all the information that has been communicated to us. And a few outstanding issues. One with regard to indigenous people. We were concerned with the issuance of the Joint Administrative Order number 1 of 2008, which provided for the issuance of ancestral domain titles and ancestral land titles to indigenous peoples. So it appears that not much has been done, or nothing substantial or significant has been done since all these years. And so we would be very grateful if you could please tell us how would that, what are the specific measures to expedite, and it is the responsibility, we understand, of the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples to issue and award these certificates which concern titles to ancestral domain. We still have some concerns about free consent. Of course, I think that is the major issue. The big issue, a cross-cutting question is this. We have in place legislation, we have in place policies, we have in place rules and guidelines, but the main complaint that we have received is with regard to the implementation. And one of the areas, quite apart from human rights defenders, which is a main concern, one of the areas concerns, for instance, the issue of free and voluntary consent with regard to agricultural or mining or large-scale projects by the indigenous peoples. So the whole idea is what is being done to beef up, to strengthen, and to come up with a procedure which is beyond, which is seen to be transparent, effective, and impartial. So this issue, this concern would address, for instance, the issue of free consent here, in respect of which there have been numerous complaints. This issue would also address, would also be a matter of concern with regard to the implementation of the law, the Anti-Terrorism Act, which is a perfectly good law in itself. There's absolutely nothing. It's the responsibility of the state to ensure the public safety and public order. But the complaints that we have received and reports are mainly directed to an abusive use against certain types of workers, journalists, etc. We have received your answers that there is a system in place, but the complaint is that this system is not foolproof, as it is. And this is where, for instance, the optional protocol would have established things beyond reasonable doubt. But of course, we have had your explanation as to that, and that is the whole purpose and rationale for having an optional protocol, which provides an international, detached forum for implementation of covenant rights. So our question would be, what has been done and what are being contemplated to strengthen measures of implementation in such a manner that it is perceived to be fair and impartial and in respect of the rights of the indigenous peoples or those who complain of undue harassment or red tagging and all the rest. And as regard tax, we thank you for the information provided, but we would still be very happy if we are favored with what are the measures to reduce disparities in wealth and disparities in income, quite apart from the tax system, which is quite wide despite some improvement in the recent years, but which according to international reports is significantly high. And one last question. You have already given us information about the representation of women, but we know from the Magna Carta of Women, which is Republic Act 97 or 10, that it provides that 50%, there should be 50% representation of women in third-level positions. And the temporary special measure under the Bangsamoro Organic Law, which is Republic Act 110/54, requires that at least 30% of party nominees of regional political parties should be women. But figures indicate that they are far from achieving that level. And so the only question would be, how is this what is being done to ensure gender parity and representation of women in that sector, that is with regard to government composition? Yes, these would be my further questions. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Kunai. So 50 minutes each of the following seconds, 50 seconds each of the following questions. I have Mr. Fiorio, Mr. Windfur, Hannibal, and Mr. Nontasud. So Mr. Fiorio, 50 seconds, please.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I just want to put, therefore, one of the questions that I was going to raise, and that is whether or not the state has a national oversight and reporting and implementation mechanism for the recommendations that have been accepted by the state from the various human rights protection agencies on an international level, and whether or not that institution, whether or not it's at ministerial level, is responsible for monitoring and responding to those recommendations. If so, could you tell us how it's composed and what its mandate is, and how exactly that institution has an impact and is involved in creating public policy? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fiorio. Mr. Windfur.
From my side to the whole delegation, I would like to come back on the issue of climate change, particularly adaptation. I've seen in your reply to the list of issues that you have this climate disaster adaptation plan, you have a national disaster preparedness plan, and you are developing the adaptation plan. Yeah? And I know that the size of the storms hitting you can hit or affect millions of people, like Haiyan many years ago. Yeah. So, and normally we know it also that if you have then people affected who have, for example, no registered housing rights or not registered land rights, it's very difficult to plan an adequate compensation for them, because where to grab on, what to know, what structures they had, what lands they were using. So my idea is how you link these adaptation policies to a good land register for all those who are maybe overseen or live in the informality, because the more you have problems with these groups, the less you will be able to compensate them properly when they are not really properly registered. Yeah? So I think it's a big plan, and Haiyan was hitting several million people. Yeah? So how to deal with this? You were also mentioning in your deliberation that you are focusing very much on renewable energies. While at the same time, I've also read that you have also a lot of new gas power plants, liquid natural gas harbors, particularly in the southern part of Luzon, opposite to Mindoro, where you have a very rich biodiversity zone, yeah, the island passage. And I was reading that the whole structures are already impacting on the fishing results or harvest of people living there. So how you deal with these type of problems? And my last question is related to this National Inquiry on Climate Change, which the National Commission on Human Rights has done, a very interesting activity to also hold carbon majors to account, not only your own, but international majors from Europe and other parts of the world. How do you think this can be further explored by the Philippines also to get some income for dealing with these climate adaptation plans? I think it's very important. And linked to this, maybe a national action plan on business and human rights could also help, holding your own companies who contribute to this account, but also maybe companies from abroad investing in your companies to holding them abroad to these elements. Yeah, so just these are the questions, because I think it will be one of the largest problems you might face, being the country most hit in Asia on climate change.
Thank you, Mr. Winford. Mr. Hannibal.
Yes, I'm very grateful for the floor, Chairperson, and a very warm welcome to the delegation as well. Thank you for the exchange of views we're having. Just an initial comment on the matter of the ratification of the protocol, and in particular the access to the individual communications mechanism vis-à-vis the answer that was given, which slightly surprised me in the sense that I'm tempted to argue the toss on it, really, and that is that if you have a series of mechanisms that are working well in the country in your internal management of the issues connected to controversial issues around economic, social and cultural rights, that would be an additional reason to subscribe to a complaints mechanism, because obviously if you've managed to make things operate very well in terms of exhausting domestic remedies in the country, it would be interesting to have that backstop and counterpoint, because there is that international commitment as well. Now, just a very quick question in terms of what was said about climate change. First of all, you're taking steps to reduce emissions, which are conditional. They're conditioned commitments. And so they will potentially fluctuate. So could you tell us exactly whether or not there are firm, solid commitments that won't do that? In terms of the maximum resources allocated, you mentioned some tax policies. What are the ramifications of those for the available resources in terms of your policy not to tax or add any additional taxes? And what's the knock-on effect for resources and potentially on economic, social and cultural rights? Another question, those organisations responsible for combating corruption seem to lack financial resources. I don't know if you have any comments on that. Are there projects in the pipeline to strengthen those systems? And lastly, are there any projects to guarantee transit to Il Verde as a protected zone? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hannibal. Mr. Nantasut.
I have three quick questions to follow up. One pertains to the issue of optional protocol. Again, and I think that a quick question on this point is whether or not you actually provide training, or is training of judges, judiciary and public prosecutor is compulsory. Within that mandate, whether or not you incorporate training on international law, particularly this covenant and its functioning. Second and third point are closely related. It has to do with business and human rights on one hand and development aggression on the other hand. We would like to know when you are due to develop and announce your National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights, and also whether or not you will adopt sectoral approach in your climate change policy. We've heard a lot about the impact caused by construction sector, caused by energy sector, and whether or not you are contemplating adopting this sectoral approach to climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nantasut. And now I think the floor will go back to the delegation. Normally you will have 20 minutes to reply, but because of our list of questions, we can go up to half an hour. So you will have additional time to reply to our additional questions. So please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and also thank you to the follow-up, very interesting follow-up questions. First of all, with respect to the just an update on the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act. Currently, the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples is revising or enhancing its NCAP Administrative Order Number 3, Series of 2012, which is actually the revised guidelines on the FPIC, while simultaneously strengthening the credibility FPIC without compromising the rights of the ICCs and the IPs to self-determination. Now, with respect to the accomplishments, as of November 2024, there are a total of 272 approved certificate of ancestral domain titles, covering a total of 6.2 million hectares, and actually 1.5 million IP rights holders. So there are also 246 approved certificate of land titles, CLTs, covering a total of 41,870 hectares, and about 255 IP rights holders. And this is actually to concretize the recognition of the ICCs and the IP's land ownership. Of course, like I said, there's still this amendment to the implementing rules and regulations of the IPRAT in order to increase the credibility of that particular law. Now, there was a question on the internally displaced persons due to conflict and disasters. Our NDRIM framework, so the National Disaster Risk Reduction Management framework, which is actually enshrined by law again, includes a portion there on recovery and rehabilitation. And so what happens is that so it goes all the way from preparedness to rescue or to response, and then over on the other side is actually on recovery and rehabilitation, where the interest is actually to build back better. Actually, NEDA is the chair of that cluster. So what happens whenever there's a disaster? First of all, there's the assessment, the post-disaster needs assessment, and this is where we try to compensate for the loss, the economic loss. And of course, there's also some prioritization that needs to be done, beginning with the issue, of course, the issue of compensation, the issue of the non-availability of land titles. That is clearly an issue for us, and that is something that we hope will also be addressed as soon as we have a fully operational digital ID. Because one of the things that we want included there is actually a digital locker, where all Filipino citizens will have access to a certain data space where they can actually store their land titles, even their diplomas, so that even if you have these disasters, you still have your credentials. I will ask later my colleague to address the issue on the BARM, but there is also this question again on the political participation of women. So actually in the Philippines, you're right, it's actually not just the women that are not really that keen on the political process, but many of the youth are not really that interested in joining the political, being in political leadership. I think it goes back to, the discontent of political leaders. And so the way to go really is, again, by way of improving the education, including actually civics education, and regaining the trust of people on government, on leaders. With respect to the executive, those in the bureaucracy, actually I would say there are many. I don't know if it's a 50-50, but I'm sure that there are many women occupying third-level positions in the executive branch, in the bureaucracy. And then there was talk about you have this issue of this carbon majors national action plan for business and human rights. As mentioned earlier by Yusek Sev, this is still in discussion, but in advanced stages. But just to say that many of our big businesses are already, very sensitized with respect to this issue on climate change. And earlier I mentioned about the subcommittee on the SDGs. Actually, under the subcommittee on the SDGs, we have what we call the stakeholders chambers, and this actually consists of many of the businesses. Actually, all of them are non-government parties. Yeah, many are in business. You have also the academe, and then of course the NGOs, and they have been. They actually are nominated as members of the stakeholders chambers because of their passion for the SDG, and they are very involved with respect to the planning, and also we make sure that we actually partner with them in implementing all these strategies to achieve our SDG. And yes, we're very interested in so to speak, generating revenues from this, from the majors, you say, the carbon majors. One of the things that have been recently passed is the Philippine Environmental Natural Capital Accounting System, the PENCAS law. So the thing that actually constrains us from I would say penalizing these big polluters or what have you, is the fact that we actually are not able to value the damage that is being done, and of course, prior to the damage, there's still no valuation. But with this recent law, which actually also means that there will be resources that will be allocated for the measurement of this of natural capital accounting, then there will be that opportunity for us to really come up with a good valuation of what is out there. And then if you have this economic activity encroaching on it, then we can actually come up with a good way of valuing the damage that was done. I think you would have heard that we are hosting the Loss and Damage Fund. Philippines is hosting that. And I think there will be a big conference this year. The mechanics of that fund is still not there yet, but I suppose this is also an avenue for us to exchange best practices with the other countries. And again, the PENCAS law will come in handy, and I hope that by that time we will have some initial estimates of this natural capital accounts. And also in our PDP, we have included there the strategy to make the Philippines as an attractive destination for ESG investment, so environmental, social, and governance investments. So we do have some guidelines on the sustainable finance framework, and we are actually reviewing it to include the social and governance part. And again, we as it is, there are already many that have been investing in the Philippines with respect to the environmental projects. My first call on Yusek Sev to add to the discussion on the ratification of the Human Rights Protocol.
Okay. I think there's nothing else to add.
Nothing else.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let-
So
yeah.
perhaps my.
I'll respond to the other
Okay.
questions.
Okay, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Madam Head of the Philippine Delegation. Let me first respond to the issue raised by, the only issue actually raised by the Honorable Furio with regards to the capacity of the state to act on recommendations coming from its engagement with the UN. Now, it's a good thing that was raised, because the Philippines right now is being recognized by the UN as a showcase with regards to the implementation of a national monitoring, implementation, reporting, and follow-up. At the core of this is our national recommendations tracking database. In fact, since 2023, we have been tapped by the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights to help in the capacity building workshops for Timor-Leste, for Cambodia, and for the Maldives. Now, this coming March, we have been requested to again spearhead the capacity building for Canada. Canada is very interested in looking at the National Monitoring, Implementation, Reporting, Follow-up of the Philippines. On the issue of, I think there was a question with regards to trainings for judges. We are very much aware that the Philippine Judicial Academy has a set of modules that they do regular trainings for judges. We will provide you a copy of the training modules, no? The subjects that are being used by the Philippine Judicial Academy. There was a question, I think, again, on whether when are we going to come up with a national action plan on business and human rights. Thank you very much for asking that. You know, in the same manner that we're looking at the anti-discrimination law, such a bill, no, what I mean, such an issue has many facets, no. There are discrimination with regards to women, children, older persons, persons with disability, etc. In the same manner that we're looking at the BHR, we cannot come up with a comprehensive business and human rights action plan because of the many issues that are involved in producing that. So as I said earlier, we are looking first on coming up with a business and human rights in the context of migration, business human rights in the context of children because of child labor, and business human rights in the context of protecting ancestral domains. So that specifically addresses concerns of indigenous people. So I guess that would also address the issue of development aggression, which was raised by Monsieur Winfer. No. And let me just continue. Again, it just occurred to me, and I would like to address this issue to the country rapporteur, because this is the first time that we've heard a commendation, an international commendation, commending the viability and the effectiveness of the Anti-Terrorism Act, if only there was a proper implementation of the law, and because of the case that were raised. Now, the issue that we would like to point out here is, you have been receiving reports, but these reports actually do not reach us. No? So may I encourage on behalf of the chair and the delegation to ask the committee, kindly ask those NGOs or CSOs that have brought up these cases of violations of the ATA to kindly refer this to the state and act on this, and so that there could be engagements. Again, if they are not secured, no, in that field of security, there's the independent National Human Rights Institution, the Commission on Human Rights, or by the way, the chair of which is here. You can always, these NGOs and CSOs can approach them and raise these cases. Because unless that they can be raised properly before the state, we can only be talking about this here and not knowing where to go. So again, Monsieur Kunai, thank you so much for bringing that up with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to add to this issue on reporting on our commitments, I'd like to mention as well that the Philippines is actually very active in the voluntary national review process in relation to the SDG. In fact, this July it will be our 4th time reporting on our commitments, the accomplishments that we have done with respect to the SDG. And then there was also a question on the NDC, the Nationally Determined Contribution. As I mentioned in my previous discussion, we are going to submit a revised NDC towards the end of this year. But even then, we will actually be taking stock of all those things that we have already done. Like I said, this number on the 75% or 2-point-something% is unconditional. The thing is, we think that we have already surpassed that, and we will continue actually to work on reducing our GHG. And it's really because, like I said, it's also good for our health. It's also good for the environment, for our own health and safety of our citizens. In fact, another new legislation is the Expanded Producer Responsibility Act, which mandates that the manufacturers or those that are selling this, this products like this, that they have to recover a certain percentage of this. We have reported on this accomplishment, how the private sector, the businesses, has been complying with the law, and again, it's better than expected. We can provide you with the numbers later on when I go back and look at the recent Philippine Development Report. Now, may I call my colleague from NEDA to discuss the updates on the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao. Ms. Fresi?
Good afternoon, everyone. For the issue on the participation of women in the parliament, in the BARM parliament, which is actually below what is required by the law. Right now, there's some studies that actually provide some challenges or the assessment of the participation of women in the parliament. Okay, I'm sorry. Sorry. So despite a male-dominated political landscape, women members of parliament in BARM actively contribute to policy making, legislation, and advocating for gender equality. Their participation has positively impacted peace-building efforts by pushing for policies that protect women's rights and promote inclusive governance. However, women's members of parliament face significant barriers, including societal norms, cultural practices, and institutional biases that marginalize also their voices. The strategies such as community consultations, legal and religious advocacy, empowerment through training and mentorship have been employed to overcome these challenges. We're also enhancing women's political participation, including continued education, stronger relationships with constituents, and promoting moral governance. These efforts are crucial for advancing gender equality and fostering a more inclusive and effective political environment in the BARM.
Yes, thank you. Just the last bit on the issue of regressive taxation. Currently, we have proposed bills that will be amending the taxes on passive income, because when you talk about wealth taxes, usually these are your passive income sources of passive sources of income, and this is currently being discussed in the legislative. But I don't know if you're aware, but we are having elections coming up this May, and so that means that probably that bill will have to be refiled in the next Congress. But just to say as well that with respect to addressing a disparity, another thing that we are doing is really making sure that our incentive system, so you have the tax system and then the incentive system on taxes, actually is also a way of dispersing development. So we provide the most liberal tax incentives for those businesses that actually locate outside of Manila. So it's actually NEDA who comes up with the list of these areas, which ones of them will be what we call the tier 1. You have the less attractive tax incentive package, tier 2, and then the tier 3 would have the most attractive incentive package. Of course, we also look at the type of businesses, especially if these are what we call the upstream businesses and very strategic industries that will be that will actually have a positive multiplier effect for the rest of the economy. So that's another way that we are addressing this disparity. So Yes, we are doing some, I would say, initiatives that require legislation, but we know that that is something that is actually not quite within our control. But we do have other tools that we can use in order to reduce regional disparity. Thank you. I think that's it, Madam Chairperson.
Thank you very much. So we can move forward now.
Sure.
And I would like to move to our next cluster, so cluster 2. And I would like to invite our colleague, Mr. Seri Nontasut, to address the questions pertaining to cluster 2. Please, you have the floor.
Mabuhay and good afternoon, the Philippines delegation. As I'm the only member from the ASEAN region here in the committee, I feel particularly privileged to be part of the country task force on the periodic report of the Philippines. The last time the Philippines met with the committee was in 2016. The country submitted the 7th report in March 2022, and the last general election of the state party took place in May 2022. We submit our list of issues to the state party in November that year, right after COVID ban. And the state party public health emergency was lifted in October. We received the replies to our list of issues in July 2024. I said this because my initial assessment is that the information and replies to us are quite updated, and it reflects the policy of the current administration. My task is to examine the progress of implementation of Articles 6 to 9, which constitute Cluster 2 of by the Philippines. On this cluster, and I think with other clusters in general, we still find many of the issues that we raised in the previous concluding observations recurrent. On Article 6, the gist of this article is toward full and productive employment. Thus, we consistently request state parties to provide us with data on employment disaggregated by sex, age, disability, and other factors. Our concern is triggered by high level of unemployment and informal employment. We only receive graphs on special training for employment program, or STEP, implemented from 2016 to 2020, and we still have not received a full picture of employment or unemployment, as well as informal employment data on the state party. While we are again putting forward the same request and expect to be supplied with the information, we obtain data that the informal sector provides livelihoods for about 21.1 million workers, approximately 60% of the total workforce. We therefore would like to follow up on the progress in passing legislation to regularize the informal sector or provide informal workers with safety net. By way of example, we observe that the Republic Act number 10524 requires that at least 1% of positions in government agencies, offices, or corporations be reserved for persons with disabilities. And we are concerned about the actual employment and quality of work that are offered to them. Article 7 provides protection in relation to labor and workplace conditions. We would like to reiterate and bring to the state party attention that we have not received a complete official data set pertaining to informal and non-standard forms of employment. However, we observe that the state party has more than 2% of the population who rely on informal work, which is ranked as the highest per capita rate in the world. It is also the fastest growing market in the gig industry. The majority of these freelancers are also more female than male. In addition to a general inquiry on the policy trajectory of the state party to protect these informal workers, we specifically would like to obtain the progress and timeline for the passage of the Senate Bill number 1746 and HB 00029 on a Magna Carta for workers in the informal economy that would offer them systematic protection. Additionally, we note that the Act number 11058 on occupational safety and health standards was passed in 2018. We would like to follow up on points that remain unclear to us, that is, the impact of such law on sweatshops. How has the situation improved? We'll still receive information about sweatshops and their precarious working conditions. We would like to know also how many labor inspectors have been appointed and the regularity of their inspection, as well as the number of cases that have been found to be in violation of the OSH laws and regulations. On just and minimum wages, the State Party deems inapplicable our recommendation on a national minimum wage and asserts that it has implemented regional minimum wages, which are determined through the National Wages and Productivity Commission, and the regional tripartite wages and productivity boards take into account regional disparities in the cost of living and other socio-economic factors. The data that is submitted to us indicates a wide range of some 46 wages and a significant variation between the minimum wages in the National Capital Region and those in the areas outside. We would like to know if the State Party has conducted an assessment into how these divergent rates have led to the entrenched disparity between the development of the capital and the underdevelopment of other regions, and how the rates outside the National Capital Region can support adequate living standards of workers. Additionally, please elucidate how such wages are adjusted and based on what criteria. We are aware that the labor inspectors are empowered to issue a compliant order mandating non-compliant establishment or employer to pay affected workers. We would like to know how many such compliant orders have been issued and whether workers who are not paid the minimum wages or suffered from occupational safety and health issues have access, apart from labor inspectors, to other remedial avenues such as the Human Rights Commission. We also receive reports concerning an increase in child labor. We would like to reiterate the findings of the ILO's Committee of Experts on the application of conventions and recommendations that there is a significant increase in child labor from nearly 600,000 to nearly 830,000, and the call on State Party to intensify measures to eliminate the commercial sexual exploitation of children and their use in drug trafficking and domestic work. A policy response on this point would be most appreciated. The last point on working conditions concerns discrimination against LGBTQI+ workers. There is already in place the Safe Space Act, which provides protection on homophobic abuses. But we would like to follow up on the passage of the SOGI Equality Bill that would provide them with more effective protection against discrimination in workplace. Article 8, Trade Union Rights. We find absent from the reply to our list of issues, responses on trade union. We have received and are concerned by reports on persecution, harassment, red tagging, and killing of trade union members, as well as government and policy inaction. We would like to have a reply on whether investigation and resolution on these cases have been made in accordance with the ILO Convention number 87, to which the Philippines is a party, with a view to protecting the freedom of association. More generally, many companies also discriminate against trade unions and their members, conducting trade union busting and violating the right to strike. We would like to inquire about the domestic framework on trade union and strike action and the role of relevant agencies in monitoring and protecting trade union rights and the right to strike. Whether labor inspection effectively include freedom to participate in trade union and the right to strike. On gender-based discrimination in the workplace, we are made worried by reports that women are put in more vulnerable and lower rank roles, or the so-called job segregation. And women also faced with harassment and gender-based violence, which is not reported, and suffer from the lack of health and hygiene facilities, which affect their well-being and productivity. We would like the State Party to explain the policy and legislative framework to address these concerns, particularly whether there is a specific gender-based unit in the relevant department and the effectiveness of such an agency. The last point is on social security. At the macro level, while we acknowledge that the State Party has ratified a number of ILO conventions, there is a notable absence. The Social Security Minimum Standards Convention number 102, which covers 9 branches of Social Security from medical care to unemployment, maternity, and survivors' benefits. The Convention allows only 3 among these 9 benefits to be ratified, and the state party can extend the benefit step by step. We would like to discuss with the state party and inquire whether it has contemplated ratifying this fundamental social security instrument. We recognize the passage in 2019 of an employment insurance benefits program under the social security system. The state party also indicated in the reply to our issue that the program recognizes persons who become unemployed and need financial assistance to support their families while looking for a new job, as well as the statistics of claims made from 2019 to 2021. While that information should be more updated, we would like to know the exclusion list of persons from that program. We acknowledge and welcome the adoption in 2023 of the social protection floor by the by NADA, chaired by the President. We would like to follow up on whether the program has a comprehensive coverage on all marginalized and vulnerable groups. We have received a report that at least one group is missing from its protection, that is, people in the street situation, or those who are in homelessness situation. Our inquiry, naturally, is whether a review will be conducted to assess the effectiveness of the social protection floor and expand its coverage to be more comprehensive and inclusive. That's all from Cluster 2. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nontasut. The delegation has now the floor for 30 minutes in order to reply to questions addressed under Cluster 3. Please, you may proceed.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the questions, and we appreciate that you know the term mabuhay, and thank you very much for all those interesting questions that you have put forth. So first of all, with respect to the issue of why you were given dated information, I think that was a miscommunication. So we were made to understand that it's only up until 2021. Yeah, but anyway, just to say that we can actually, easily just update all those information that were provided to you. So with respect to the to unemployment, I mentioned earlier that 2023 and 2024, our unemployment rate is actually at 4.3%, and it has been going down. And like I said, it's one of the sectors that has quickly recovered right after the pandemic. I guess they were just rearing to really earn again, be productively employed. So yes, we do have data disaggregation by age, by sex. While we do not have the data on disability, this is actually being gathered as well. But given that I mean those disabled who are employed, my problem as a statistician, I have some reservations of using that survey data, given that it's a rare event supposedly. But we can actually just again give you the information with the corresponding information on the standard error as well. On the informal workers, actually, our reckoning is that we have about less than 40% who are in the informal sector. So a statistic that I mentioned earlier is that the proportion of wage and salaried workers in private establishment is about 51%. So if you include even those in the other, let's say in government and in other institutions, that would actually go up to about 62%. But having said that, we have recently again undertaken a very quick rapid appraisal, just trying to understand this the informal sector workers in a region in 2 cities in Mindanao, south of the Philippines. And we noticed that again there are several types of informal sector workers. There are a lot of them who are in the informal sector because they do not have other options. And so again, the intervention would be different. But there are those who are in the informal sector because they appreciate the flexible work arrangement, especially the time, with respect to the time. But we see that for this particular sector, the need is again different. It will have to do with social protection mechanisms, and so we are looking into that. We are actually again finalizing this study, hopefully replicating it in other areas first, then come up with a proposed recommendation, policy recommendation on making sure that their rights are addressed. You mentioned about the OSH, the Occupational Safety and Health Standards. Actually, we have a very good compliance rate with respect to this OSH. But even then, right after our experience with COVID, we are actually having another look at this occupational safety and health standards, and we would like to adopt the safety settings framework, safe settings framework of healthy settings framework, rather, of the Department of Health. So as you know, it's not just to do with the, having the protective gear against accidents, but we also want to make sure that they are also, in terms of the health, in terms of issue on ventilation, etc. So this is something that is being reviewed. And then I would like to later on ask my colleague to mention something about the red tagging. Just the part on the minimum wage setting, geophysical conditions, and we go back to making sure that there's equality in opportunities, so that we would encourage investments also in areas outside of the NCR. We do have a law on the minimum wage rationalization, and it actually lists down 10 different factors that we need to consider in setting the minimum wage. But by and large, this is still a negotiation, because as you know, there's at least 3 parties involved there. You have the labor sector, labor sector representative, you have the employer sector, you have the government sector, and then in coming up, before we do this deliberation, we actually conduct public hearings and public consultations. So it's really a bargaining exercise. But even then, what we did recently, this is also in line with the development of the labor market development plan that we were asked to do by Congress. We also looked at the trend in real wages from 2018 actually until 2023, and using 2018 as the base year, we found that real wages have actually increased. So this is not just the minimum wage, but average wages in general, in real terms, have actually increased, and so there's what we want to happen as well is that we provide opportunities for workers to increase their employability. And that's why we want to expand opportunities for lifelong learning, for micro-credentialing, for skills training, reskilling, and upskilling. And related to this is also one reason why we want the inclusive work arrangements to be institutionalized, because we think that is one way for those who are currently working to be able to access these opportunities to increase their employability without having to resign. Now, may I first ask my colleague from Yusek Torres to mention to discuss about the red tagging of trade unionists.
Thank you, Yusek De Leon. Madam Chair, honorable members of the ISIS-CAR Committee, colleagues, good afternoon. The issue on red tagging was once again brought out, as with the first cluster a while ago, and as the Executive Director of the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict, or NTF-ELCAC, I am glad to finally be given the chance to share with this august committee our position on red tagging. As stated by the state during the Universal Periodic Review, there is no state policy to attack, harass, or intimidate human rights defenders, including environmental rights defenders, lawyers, and other practitioners of the legal profession and the media. There are available judicial remedies to address cases of violations of the rights of life, liberty, and to freedom of expression, association, and assembly. The Philippines' independent judiciary and its accessible courts have one of the most powerful tools to address any form of intimidation and or harassment, which are protective writs of amparo and habeas data. Regarding the issue of alleged red tagging incidents, the Philippine government stands on solid ground against claims of red tagging individuals and organizations as terrorists or supporters of the Communist Party of the Philippines, New People's Army, and the National Democratic Fronts. Reports are strictly evaluated and vetted through the disclosure of former members of the CPP, NPA, NDF who have returned to the folds of the law, and those who have chosen to stay with the group but were captured and arrested. The Philippine government has consistently rejected the word red tagging due to the absence of any policy or jurisprudence sustaining such claims. The NTF-ELCAC has often been mischaracterized, particularly regarding allegations of red tagging. Our mandate is dedicated to safeguarding the human rights of all individuals, especially those in vulnerable communities. We provide accurate information about individuals involved in terror grooming, empowering people to make informed choices that protect themselves and their communities. The Philippine government respects all ideologies as long as it does not espouse violent extremism leading to a violent overthrow of a duly constituted authority. However, the CPP, NPA, NDF has no reverence to duly formed government and democratic institutions and processes, which is the heart in the enjoyment of democracy in the country. The task force stands on solid ground against claims of red tagging individuals and organizations. The revelation about the CPP, NPA, NDF has been strictly evaluated and vetted through the disclosure of former members of the CPP, NPA, NDF who have returned to the mainstream of society. The Philippine government remains committed to the principles of the ISESCAR. Through inclusive governance and sustainable development programs, we strive to build a just, peaceful, and equitable society. We look forward to a more robust collaboration as we implement the National Action Plan for Unity, Peace, and Development 2025 to 2028, addressing the root causes of insurgency and promoting civic space. That's all, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yusek Jun. I'd like to go back to the issue on the minimum wage setting. I forgot to mention that there are huge variation in the cost of living across the Philippines, again owing to our archipelagic characteristic. And this is also part of the consideration when we do minimum wage setting. In fact, we also do the analysis, the NEDAD comes up with analysis of, looking at what would be the impact if, let's say, you have just one minimum wage all across the country, and the study would show that those that are in the most far-flung areas would be greatly disadvantaged, because all the more reason that the investors will not be attracted to locate in those regions or in those provinces. Just to mention as well that with respect to the social security, yes, there's sorry, on the social protection floor, as mentioned, it was the NEDA Social Development Committee, and I chaired the Executive Technical Board of the SDC, and so we were the ones who came up with so-called the dirty work of that social protection floor. The major framework that we have used is actually, again, the life cycle approach, and for each of these stages in the life cycle, we identified the most vulnerable, and that what would be the floor protection for them. Even then, we do note that it will be a progressive realization, again, subject to fiscal constraints, because when we brought this up to the NEDA board, chaired by the president, we were still just recovering from the pandemic. But every time that we would have the opportunity, then we actually include certain provisions in the social protection floor in the fiscal program itself. In particular, let's say the supplementary feeding program in the basic education, what we have managed to do beginning with the previous budget year and until this year is to lengthen the number of days of feeding for the basic education. And we are actually looking again at all those low-hanging fruits that we can still bring in. On the issue of increasing the coverage to include those people in street situations, we have what we call the Pag-abot program, or reaching out, yeah, reach out program. So this one aims to reach out to the vulnerable and disadvantaged children and individuals and families in street situations, and welcome them either to first their place of origin, or a temporary shelter, or placement to long-term residential facilities, or a permanent placement to a foster family, or adoption for those children who may have been abandoned. So this program is actually currently ongoing, and the current Secretary of the Department of Social Welfare and Development is very active in reaching out to the street children. One of the things that he really wanted to do was to have them all registered so that they will all be at least identified. So in 2024, there were 372 individuals, and 2,271 individuals were included in the program and provided with interventions. And in total, 2,643 were reached out, and of which this is actually higher than the target that have been set for the year. So, on child labor, there. On child labor, we do have the National Commission Against Child Labor that began during the previous administration, but it was continued until this current administration. So in 2020, the DOLE inspected 10,814 establishments, 4 of which have noted child labor violations. And 6 children were found in these 4 establishments, and they were removed from child labor by the DOLE after the inspection. So of the 268,000 plus child laborers that were profiled from 2018 to 2020, a total of 21,930 were provided with school supplies, food packs, toiletries, hygiene kits, and other items. And other services provided to the profiled child laborers were educational assistance, medical assistance, birth registration, and referral to the special program for employment of students. I also would like to say that for the 4Ps, the conditional cash transfer, one of the components of the conditional cash transfer is the family development sessions, where the parents actually attend these sessions, and one of the first modules being discussed there is the Convention on the Rights of Children, and also on this against the child labor. As you know, if they are four-piece beneficiaries, then they actually they might be taken off the program. They might be removed from the program if they are found to be to engage their children in child labor. Perhaps I can ask my colleague, the executive director of the National Commission on Disability Affairs, to discuss our program with respect to the persons with disabilities. Ms. Glenda.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to the August body. So currently, the repertoire asked about Republic Act 10524, or the 1%, expanding the 1% for government employment for persons with disability. So currently, we have a total number of 0.40% out of the 1% that is being allocated or given quota to the government. For some reasons, being employed in the government needs to have eligibility, and most of the persons with disability doesn't have eligibility in order for them to take on the plantilla position. So what the NCDA does is that we provide training for them and free online civil service review exam, and the National Council on Disability Affairs has now on the 5th batch of giving a review class so that they can pass the eligibility requirements of persons with disability. And also, aside from the 1% quota, we also partner with Philippine Business for Inclusion, wherein we conduct skills match set so that we can place persons with disability for those jobs that the private sectors are needing for persons with disability. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ma'am Glenda. Just to mention as well regarding the SOGI, the discrimination against on the basis of gender preference. So it was already mentioned about the Safe Spaces Act. In addition to that, we have the Gender Responsive Education Policy, which was issued in 2017. And so the DepEd has issued this department order that protects children from all forms of gender-related violence and also bullying. Then, of course, our Magna Carta of Women also mentioned that there should not be any discrimination on the basis of gender preference. And there's also the Anti-Sexual Harassment Act, and under the law, women are protected from sexual favors, and also including those who are being harassed because of their gender preference. Just to say as well that in many of the formal establishments, there are ongoing training regarding sexual harassment laws, especially in government offices. So there's a lot of awareness regarding this one. And then on the SOGI bill, just to mention about the update. So earlier I mentioned that we still do not have that law, but we have an executive order that created a special committee on the LGBTQIA+ affairs to ensure that policies, plans, and programs that effectively promote equality, equity, and non-discrimination, inclusion, and the well-being of the LGBTQIA+ community are incorporated in the Diversity and Inclusion Program. And then, of course, we also mentioned that there are a number of laws that have to do with making sure that they are not discriminated against on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. So, yeah, the status is that it's still in the period of interpolation as of September 11, 2024, in the House, in the lower house, and in the Senate, it's still pending in the Committee on Rules. This is as of August 9, 2023. But as I mentioned earlier, we have elections coming up this May, so that means we will be working with the new Congress, and we will continue to advocate for this bill. But again, it's a legislative process. On the there was mention about the gig economy. So this is one of those informal types of employment, which for which the interest really is because of the flexible work arrangements. I mentioned earlier that we have a Telecommuting Act that provides that policy and regulatory framework, essentially ensuring that the rights of the workers and also of the employers are protected. But we know that there's still a lot that we can improve on that Telecommuting Act, and therefore we are working towards an inclusive work arrangement policy framework. With respect to the gig economy, again, making sure that they have social protection, that they are covered. They may not want to be employed in the formal sector, but just the same, we want to make sure that they're free from these occupational hazards. I think that is it, Madam Chairperson.
Thank you very much for the responses provided so far. And it's now time to open the floor to questions, follow-up questions on cluster 2 from colleagues. And after that, we will, I will say how we will further proceed, having into account that we only have 35 minutes left, so we will need to adjust a bit this program for today and for tomorrow. So I have Mr. Nontasut, please.
I am grateful to the delegation, especially the head of delegation, in providing us with information. I have perhaps as follow-up 4 quick points. The first one, I think we should revert again to the issue of minimum wage, which occupies the central attention on this cluster. Our concern really has to do not particularly with the diversity, but with the fact whether or not it will be indexed, it will be sufficient, it will really provide adequate living standard for workers. So we know that you will have indexation for an update or for revision in a timely or periodic manner. But can you assess whether those 46 regional wages really have been assessed that they are sufficient to provide adequate living standard? Point 2 is actually, we know that there is diversity of workers type. Gig workers, children, women, persons with disabilities, children, older persons, LGBTQI+. But I forgot to mention overseas migrant workers. During COVID time and now, what's the role of your government, the state party, in making sure that they are sufficiently protected, especially when it comes to contractualization? The third point has to do with remedy. And I asked already a question pertaining to whether or not the Department of Labor and Employment, DOL, has sufficient inspectors, how many inspections that they have rounded up on an annual basis. We also would like to know the ease with which victims of workplace abuses can have access to remedy, in addition to labor ministry or labor agency, whether or not, in particular, the Commission on Human Rights serves as a non-judicial avenue for remedial measures. The fourth point, I listen with interest the direction of your government in making sure that you are ESG destination. Of course, we would like to emphasize that ESG also parallels with the so-called diversity, inclusion, and equity policy in workplace. So maybe it would be beneficial to have a reaction from the Department of Labor, whether or not you are moving toward adopting this kind of policy, and make sure, and this naturally and logically aligns with what we asked you under the first cluster, the Business and Human Rights Plan of Action. This would be the entry point through which you can mandate businesses to make sure that they integrate the DEI policy and make sure that you are really the ESG destination. Those are my 4 quick points on this cluster. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nontasud. Mr. Hannibal.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And many thanks also to the delegation for all of the information they've provided. I have some specific questions to ask about some articles of the Labour Code which seem to be imposing restrictions, or which can be interpreted as restrictions to form and join a trade union, which would run counter to the covenant. This is particularly Article 240C, which says that there must be 20% participation for a trade union to be formed. And 244A of the Labour Code says that a federation or a national trade union must organise 10 recognised chapters in order to become registered as a trade union. And Article 278G of the Labour Code, which says that the Minister of Labour and Employment can settle a dispute. I would like to know whether you have any information about this and whether you are envisaging changing these articles in order not to have any barriers stand in the way of the right to form and join a trade union. Thank you.
Ms. Perez.
Muchas gracias a la delegación por.
Thank you very much to the delegation for this exchange that you're having with us this afternoon, and thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. I was not able to find any information, including in the database, about persons between the ages of 15 and 24 that are not studying and not in employment. Now, this is a particularly vulnerable section of the population because they fall outside the scope of education policies, and they've also not been able to find appropriate work. It would be important for us to have information about this group and for the data to be gender disaggregated. Our understanding is that there is a large percentage of women that are undertaking unpaid care work in the home. And because there are no specific policies, finding support for those who are providing these caring services for society, it's difficult for women who are in this position to find employment on the market. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Perez. I see no further requests for the floor, so my proposal is that you start responding to the follow-up questions, and we go until 5:45. And then we pause in order to be able for our colleague from Cluster 3 to address you the questions pertaining to Cluster 3, and you will have 10 minutes additional time tomorrow to go back to Cluster 2, yeah, the follow-up. Okay. So with that, we continue with the responses for 10 minutes, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. So again, going back to the issue on the minimum wage, I mentioned that in the minimum wage setting, there are actually 10 factors that we need to consider. And one of that is actually the poverty line that correspond to the province. In the Philippines, we have poverty thresholds that vary depending on the province itself. So that is actually a consideration. And even then, we also consider that we also recognize that the minimum wage is, by and large, what we would call a starting wage. And therefore, the interest really is to make sure that they move up that career path. As much as possible, we don't want, those who are of mature age that are still receiving minimum wage. Now, so with respect to the OFWs, we have recently, actually during the time of COVID, we have created the Department of Migrant Workers. That was supposed to be part of my opening statement earlier, but I ran out of time. So that Department of Migrant Workers provides or ensures the protection of our OFWs throughout the journey of this migration. So from recruitment, so they make sure that this is actually what we call the legal recruiters, all the way to transit, all the way to working in the destination countries, and then finally the reintegration back to the Philippines. So right now they are engaging with the various labor ministries in the destination countries. Again, absent an international convention on migrant workers. So they are doing these bilateral agreements to make sure that we would have that they would be protected against abuse, that they would have proper the leave and the rest day, etc. During that, you mentioned about the time of COVID. Actually, a number have been. We have more than 900,000 who were repatriated or who were brought back to the Philippines during that time of COVID, and of this, several of them have received assistance, and we also made sure that they were the children of these displaced workers were given scholarships, even if they are already in the tertiary education or in higher education. And right now, we always make sure that there's enough resources, enough funding for the Department of Migrant Workers and our Overseas Workers Welfare Administration for if there's a need for an immediate repatriation of our OFWs that are affected by political strife in their destination countries. And nearly 28,000 OFWs and their families have been repatriated during the period 2020 to 2022. And like I said, right now there's also that. And may I I'll also be requesting my colleague from DOLE to respond to the issue regarding the labor code. But may I just say that the percentage of those in the what you say 10 to 24 15 to 24 years old, actually this is one of those information that was that is being monitored in the previous PDP. In this current PDP, we did not in the previous PDP we had problems coming up with the NEET, so not in employment, education, or training, and so we only had the data on those not in education or employment. And so we worked first with our Philippine Statistics Authority to include the information on training. And we are waiting for updated data from them so that we would have this NEET. But even then, like we actually have ongoing programs right now. We have a well-resourced program on the government internship program. So in the government internship program, you have the students actually who can be employed in government for a period of time up to 6 months, and they are being paid the minimum wage. There's also the special program for employment of the students, and so this is also to make sure that they will be given the opportunity for employment. And of course, even more important is actually the ALS, the alternative learning system of our Department of Education. But perhaps we'll discuss more about that tomorrow. But for now, may I request my colleague from the Department of Labor and Employment to discuss something about the labor code.
Okay. Thank you, Undersecretary De Los Santos, Madam Chair, and thank you for the questions that were presented to us with respect to quite a number of issues. With respect to the labor code and child labor, that is always in constant review of the tripartite partners. We have a national tripartite industrial peace council that is institutionalized in terms of studying policy, studying legislation, and looking after ways by which we can improve current laws. And the law on child labor is one of the things that is being closely looked at, because we are currently intensifying our efforts in terms of protecting child labor and prohibiting the same. We have a child labor prevention and elimination program. The department profiled a total number of 160,288 child laborers who were likewise referred for necessary services. Of this number, 119,965 were referred to various services and or agencies, organizations. 54,996 were provided with necessary services, and 35,382 children were removed from child labor. In 2023, the DOLE aims to monitor, and for 2023 and 2024, the DOLE aims to monitor the status of 160,288 profiled child labor. The DOLE aims to monitor the administrative data. The following represents the DOLE aims to monitor the status of 160,288 profiled child laborers. We are also looking at rescuing child laborers through our Sagip Batang Manggagawa program, or Save Children Workers, and 2,973 working child permits were issued. So that is our program for child labor, which we are trying to intensify and making sure that it is eliminated in accordance with the law, and also with respect to ILO conventions on the topic. If I may also comment on the statements regarding the right to organize, join unions, and the right to strike. We continue to register unions, meaning as they organize, they register with us, and we have a total of 137,368 labor organizations in the country already. Total membership is 5,659,791, consisting of 2,336,282 male members and 2,098,864 female members. We have also registered 116,804 workers' associations, covering more than 3 million members, comprising 1.5 million male members and 1.6 million female members. We've had a continuing dialogue with the ILO with respect to incidents involving workers who were either killed or disappeared while they were allegedly conducting their work. And we have adopted measures to ensure that this will be prevented in the future. Executive Order number 23 was adopted in 2023, and its aim was to create an interagency committee composed of various agencies that work on investigating cases relating to freedom of association. This interagency committee is headed by the Executive Secretary himself and is operated directly under the President of the Philippines and was made in accordance with the recommendation of the high-level tripartite mission of the ILO last year. 2 years ago, I'm sorry. And then we have also made sure that up to the regional level, we have a tripartite body that monitors what is happening on the ground, following up on the investigation of these cases, as well as making sure that that similar cases will be prevented. In fact, over the last so many months, the regional tripartite monitoring boards have issued 40 resolutions asking for certain cases to be already delisted from the cases that the ILO is handling because either the cases have been completely investigated or have reached a resolution that is favorable to all the parties. And then with respect to the direction towards DEI, I would like to say that the Department of Labor is deep into it. We have a gender and development agenda, a plan that encompasses 2024 to 2028. It is an offshoot of studies that show that women, the participation of women have declined in the labor force. And of course, we also saw vulnerabilities where we need to intervene. And one example for that is child labor, as I mentioned earlier, and also kasambahays or domestic helpers. This agenda, I can have it available for everyone because it is a comprehensive agenda on gender and development that the Department of Labor is pushing. I don't have the data yet for the inspectors, but over the course of 2023, I think we were able to inspect around 400,000 establishments. I cannot say that we have a sufficient number of labor inspectors. There's always that desire to have more, but at the moment, the number is able to function in terms of investigating, in terms of inspecting establishments and making sure that these establishments comply with health and safety standards. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the responses. And as mentioned, we will be continuing responding to these two questions under cluster 2. If you feel like there are questions which were left unanswered, and you will be allocated 25 minutes tomorrow in order to deal with pending questions from cluster 2 or any other questions that you think that need supplementary responses. So with that, I would like now to invite our cluster leader for cluster 3, Mr. Ludovic Hannebel, to address the questions pertaining to this part of the covenant. Mr. Hannebel, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor, and thanks once again to the delegation of the Philippines for taking part in this dialogue today with our Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. Now, the questions I will be asking relate to the protection of the family and the child, also to a decent standard of living, to combating poverty, and I'll also be asking questions about health. And I will refer to matters relating to Articles 10 to 12 of the Covenant. So, Article 10, protection of the family and of the child. I would like to know what your reflection is on the issue of polygamy in the country. Now, this is an issue which has been raised by other committees too, and we would like to know what the situation is with the different recommendations that have been addressed to you by other treaty bodies. Another issue which has been raised often, I believe, is the matter of divorce and the changing family situation here. What measures are being put in place to deal with divorce procedures? And can you tell us more about what the country's thinking is about this? Now, moving on to children, and particularly the involvement of children in conflict and violations of children's rights during armed conflicts. Have you received any complaints about serious violation of children's rights during conflict, or any information relating to the recruitment and enrollment of children in the armed forces? Could you also tell us what the updated situation is of complaints of serious human rights violations of children during conflict? You did answer this question in the list of issues, so I wonder whether any sanctions have been applied in these cases. Now, some of the questions obviously cover ground that you've already covered, but I would like to seek further information about child labour, which you have mentioned. But what measures is the state taking to combat the exploitation of children? What sanctions are put in place? And what preventive action, particularly in disaster-struck area? And what about the worst forms of child labour or dangerous work for children? What is also being done about the sexual exploitation of children, and particularly what measures ensure that the private sector applies the relevant provisions which exist in the country, notably by preventing online exploitation of children? Is there any blocking of suspect financial transactions, for example, relating to this sexual exploitation of children? Moving on to birth registration, what are you doing to make it easier to register children from indigenous communities or Muslim communities? Could you tell us anything about this? And moving on to rape, what measures are taken to protect victims of rape, and particularly to repeal legal provisions that prevent perpetrators of rape to avoid prosecution by marrying the victim or by other means? What about violence on the internet? Can you tell us specific measures you've taken to combat online violence against women and children? And is there any tangible result to such measures that you've put in place? I'd now like to move on to the protection of the LGBTQIA+ community. What specific measures have you taken to ensure that there can be gender affirmation and that this care is provided by all insurances, including private insurance? And what measures have you put in place to ensure equal access to civil partnerships or even marriage or other forms of union for persons belonging to this community? Can you tell us how you can simplify the legal recognition of gender while respecting the right to bodily integrity and to self-recognition of intersex and other persons? Article 11, a decent standard of living. There are some questions on poverty and food insecurity. Could you tell us what the consequence is of the liberalisation of rice law on food security? What is the impact on malnutrition and food insecurity, and what measures are taken to ensure access to foodstuffs which are affordable by people in a precarious situation? I also wish to touch on the right to housing and recent figures on numbers of the homeless. How can marginalised groups and people in the informal sector have access to housing? And what about measures to prevent evictions and to ensure rehousing? Finally, Article 12 on health. Can you tell us what access there is for vulnerable groups and what measures are taken to ensure that indigenous persons can have access to services, for example, to vaccination and mental health services? What about measures to ensure access to health for persons with disabilities, especially those that are kept isolated in the home? And what measures to ensure mental health services are made available in rural areas and for people in a marginalised situation? On sexual and reproductive health rights, what state measures are there to ensure that there are no barriers to accessing emergency contraception? And what about the criminalisation of abortion? Do you have any information about forced pregnancy? And how are these issues dealt with in the state? What measures are taken to ensure that post-abortion care is available without fear of discrimination or criminal action? And what measures are taken to promote education campaigns on reproductive health, targeting rural people and young people? I will conclude by touching on the issue of drugs, which has already been touched on. But I have the following questions to ask. Are you planning any decriminalisation for the personal use of drugs and finding alternatives to imprisonment, for example, rehabilitation and risk reduction programs, particularly seen from the angle of a right to health, because we are discussing Article 12 here? How have treatment programs and rehabilitation programs for drug users been assessed by the states? And what measures have you taken to ensure they are more accessible and have a greater impact? What protection is in place to avoid stigmatization and criminalization of persons who are receiving treatment for drug addiction? And finally, what measures are taken and this is a key question, what measures are taken to put an end to the war on drugs and the reparation programs for victims of this war, which may perhaps be planned? So, as I said before, I've covered some issues that have already been raised, but we're really trying to touch every possible corner of the covenant with you.
For excellent management of time. And with that, we can conclude our meeting for today. And we will reconvene tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for the continuation of this dialogue as previously indicated. So with that, we would like to thank you very much for the responses provided so far and very much looking forward to continuing the exchange tomorrow. Have a nice evening, and the meeting is closed.
Thank you. Thank you very much.